Joseph and his brothers, a biblical bedtime story. In the quiet hours before sleep, when the world grows still and our hearts turn inward, we find ourselves drawn to stories that speak to the deepest parts of our humanity. Tonight, we journey into one of the most profound tales ever told, a story of jealousy and love, of betrayal and forgiveness, of dreams both literal and metaphorical that shape the destiny of nations. Take a slow, deep breath and let the concerns of your day begin to fade. Feel your body settling into comfort as we prepare to walk alongside a young dreamer whose visions would one day save a nation, but first would lead him through the darkest valleys of human experience. This is a story that spans decades and continents, that moves from the pastoral hills of Canaan to the glittering palaces of Egypt. It is a tale of brothers whose love curdled into hatred, of a father's grief that nearly destroyed him, and of a young man who learned that sometimes the path to our greatest destiny leads through our deepest suffering. Our story begins in the land of Canaan, in the household of Jacob, whom God had renamed Israel. Jacob was now an old man, his hair silver with age, his eyes soft with wisdom. Among his 12 sons there was one who held a special place in his heart, Joseph, the firstborn son of his beloved Rachel, who had died giving birth to Benjamin. Joseph moved through his father's household like light dancing across water, beautiful, favored, and unconsciously cruel in the way that the blessed often are. Jacob's love for Joseph was visible to all who knew the family. While his other sons worked in the fields and tended the flocks, Joseph often remained close to his father, listening to stories of angels and ladders, of wrestling matches with the divine, of promises that stretched across generations. This favoritism planted seeds of bitterness that would grow into a harvest of pain. When Joseph was 17, Jacob made him a coat of many colors, a magnificent garment that set him apart from his brothers, like a banner proclaiming preference. But if the coat stirred resentment, it was Joseph's dreams that transformed that resentment into hatred. The first dream came to him in the innocence of youth. He saw himself and his brothers binding sheaves in the field, and suddenly his sheaf stood upright, while theirs gathered around it and bowed down. When he shared this dream with his family, his brothers' faces darkened with anger. "Do you indeed think you will reign over us?" they asked, their voices sharp with indignation. But Joseph, with the thoughtless honesty of youth, shared yet another dream. This time he saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. Even Jacob, who loved him dearly, rebuked him for this vision. "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" Dreams are dangerous things. They reveal the hidden architecture of destiny, and destiny rarely asks permission before it reshapes the world. The dreams lodged in everyone's hearts like thorns. The brothers nursed their anger like a flame, feeding it with every glance at Joseph's colorful coat, every word of their father's obvious preference, every memory of those presumptuous dreams. The opportunity for revenge came when Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were pasturing the flocks far from home in the region of Dothan. Joseph set out in his distinctive coat, carrying provisions and his father's love. When the brothers saw him approaching from a distance, that familiar figure in the coat of many colors, their resentment crystallized into deadly intent. "Here comes this dreamer," they said to one another. "Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." Reuben, the eldest, felt the weight of responsibility and tried to deflect their murderous intent. "Let us not kill him," he urged. "Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but lay no hand upon him." He planned to rescue Joseph later, to restore him to their father, and perhaps find some measure of peace. When Joseph arrived, eager and unsuspecting, his brothers fell upon him like wolves. They stripped him of his coat and threw him into an empty cistern, its walls too high and smooth for escape. As he cried out from the depths, they sat down to eat bread, their hearts already hardening against the sound of his pleading. When Judah saw a caravan of Ishmaelites approaching, traders with camels loaded with spices and balm bound for Egypt, he proposed a different solution to their problem. "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And so they pulled Joseph from the pit, dirty, terrified, pleading, and sold him to the traders for 20 pieces of silver. As the caravan disappeared into the distance, carrying Joseph toward an unknown fate in Egypt, the brothers took his coat and dipped it in goat's blood, creating evidence for the lie they would tell their father. When the brothers returned home, they brought with them the bloodied coat and a carefully crafted story. "We found this," they said to Jacob, their lie burning on their tongues. "See whether it is your son's coat or not." Jacob recognized it at once. "It is my son's coat. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." He tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins, mourning for his son many days. No comfort could reach him in his grief. Meanwhile, in Egypt, Joseph found himself in the household of Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. The transition from beloved son to slave must have been brutal, but Joseph possessed a resilience that would carry him through every trial. More than that, he carried with him the presence of the Lord, and this divine favor became evident to all who knew him. Potiphar noticed that everything Joseph touched seemed to prosper. When Joseph managed the household affairs, they ran smoothly. When he oversaw the fields, the crops flourished. When he handled business matters, profits increased. The Egyptian recognized that Joseph's God was blessing everything under the young man's care. So Potiphar put him in charge of his entire household, holding back nothing except his wife. Potiphar's wife, drawn to his youth and beauty, sought to seduce him day after day. "Lie with me," she whispered, but Joseph refused. "How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" He fled from her presence, but she caught his garment as he ran, and when her seduction turned to fury at his rejection, she used that garment as evidence of a lie. "The Hebrew servant whom you brought among us came in to me to mock me," she told her husband. "But when I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled." Potiphar's anger burned hot. Once again, Joseph's garment became an instrument of false witness. Once again, he descended. this time into Pharaoh's prison, where political prisoners and forgotten souls waited in darkness. But even in prison, the Lord was with Joseph. The keeper of the prison soon noticed the same quality that Potiphar had observed. Everything Joseph touched seemed to prosper. The prison ran more smoothly under his influence. The other prisoners responded to his leadership, and soon the keeper put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners and everything that was done in the prison. In the darkness of his cell, Joseph encountered two men whose dreams would change his destiny. Pharaoh's chief butler and chief baker, both fallen from favor and haunted by visions they could not understand. "We have had dreams," they told Joseph, "and there is no interpreter of them." "Do not interpretations belong to God?" Joseph replied, "Tell me your dreams." The butler dreamed of a vine with 3 branches that budded, blossomed, and produced ripe grapes, which he pressed into Pharaoh's cup. Joseph interpreted, "Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position." The baker, encouraged, shared his dream of 3 white baskets on his head, the topmost filled with baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds came and ate from the basket. Joseph's interpretation was harsh. "Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree." Both interpretations came to pass exactly as Joseph had foretold. But the butler, restored to his position, forgot the Hebrew slave who had explained his dream. 2 years passed. 2 years of waiting, of wondering if he had been forgotten by both man and God. But providence moves according to its own calendar, not ours. When Pharaoh himself was troubled by dreams that none of his wise men could interpret, 7 fat cows devoured by 7 lean cows, 7 plump ears of grain swallowed by 7 thin ears, the butler finally remembered. "I do remember my faults this day," he told Pharaoh, and spoke of the Hebrew prisoner who could interpret dreams. Joseph was hastily brought from the dungeon, shaved and given clean clothes, before being presented to the most powerful man in the world. "I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it," Pharaoh said. "It is not in me," Joseph replied with the humility that suffering had taught him. "God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace." The dreams were clear to Joseph. 7 years of abundance would come upon Egypt, followed by 7 years of famine so severe that the abundance would be forgotten. He advised Pharaoh to appoint someone to gather grain during the years of plenty and store it against the coming disaster. Pharaoh was amazed. "Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God?" He set Joseph over all the land of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. The Hebrew slave became vizier of the greatest kingdom on earth. Joseph married Asenath and had 2 sons, Manasseh, "For God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house," and Ephraim, "For God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction." During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph traveled throughout Egypt, implementing his plan. Grain was collected and stored in vast quantities, like the sand of the sea, so much that they stopped measuring it. The famine came as foretold, spreading across all lands. In Canaan, Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, and sent his 10 sons to buy food, keeping only Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, at home. When the brothers arrived and bowed before the Egyptian governor, Joseph recognized them immediately, but they did not know him. The dreams of his youth were fulfilled, the sheaves bowing down, the stars prostrate before his authority. But Joseph was no longer the naive boy who had flaunted his father's favor. 20 years of exile had taught him about the human heart, including his own. He chose to test his brothers, to see what manner of men they had become. "You are spies," he accused them harshly. "You have come to see the nakedness of the land." They protested their innocence, speaking of their father and their youngest brother left at home. Joseph put them in prison for 3 days, then released 9 of them, keeping Simeon as hostage until they returned with Benjamin. He secretly returned their money in their grain sacks, adding to their terror. When they discovered it on the journey home, they were afraid. "What is this that God has done to us?" Jacob was reluctant to send Benjamin, his remaining link to his beloved Rachel. But when the grain was consumed and famine pressed hard upon them, he had no choice. The brothers returned to Egypt with gifts and double money, and with Benjamin, Joseph prepared a feast for them, seating them according to their birth order, a detail that amazed them. He sent portions from his own table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than any of the others. The final test came when Joseph commanded his steward to put his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. When the brothers had departed, Joseph sent men after them, and the cup was found where it had been planted. They returned in anguish, tearing their clothes. Judah, who had once proposed selling Joseph into slavery, now offered himself as a slave in Benjamin's place. "God forbid that I should do so," Judah pleaded. "Only the man in whose hand the cup was found shall be my slave. But as for you, go up in peace to your father." Then Judah made a speech that shattered Joseph's heart. Speaking of their father's love for Benjamin, of how the loss of Joseph had nearly destroyed him, of how Jacob's life was bound up in the lad's life. Joseph could bear it no longer. "Make everyone go out from me," he commanded his servants. When he was alone with his brothers, he wept so loudly that the Egyptians and Pharaoh's household heard. "I am Joseph," he said. "Does my father still live?" The brothers were speechless with terror and amazement. The brother they had betrayed now held their lives in his hands. "Come near to me, I pray you," Joseph said gently, seeing their fear. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life." These words contain the deepest mystery of the story. How evil can serve good, how betrayal can become salvation, how the very act meant to destroy can become the instrument of deliverance. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. But God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. The brothers wept together, and Joseph embraced Benjamin and kissed all his brothers. The rift that had torn their family apart for more than 20 years was finally healed. Joseph sent them back to Canaan with wagons and provisions to bring their father and all their households to Egypt. When Jacob heard that Joseph was alive and governor over all the land of Egypt, his heart nearly failed him. But when he saw the wagons, his spirit revived. "It is enough," he said. "Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." The reunion between father and son was a moment that transcended time itself. When Joseph's chariot appeared on the horizon, Jacob's eyes, dim with age, somehow knew. Joseph fell upon his father's neck and wept for a long time. "Now let me die," Jacob said, "since I have seen your face, because you are still alive." Joseph settled his family in the land of Goshen, where they prospered and multiplied. He nourished his father and brothers throughout the remaining years of famine, repaying their cruelty with kindness, their rejection with provision. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years, and when his time came to die, he died peacefully, surrounded by his sons, his transformation from a grasping young man to a faithful patriarch complete. When Jacob died, the brothers feared that Joseph's mercy had been only for their father's sake. They sent a message claiming Jacob had commanded Joseph to forgive them. Joseph wept when he received their message. "Do not fear," he told them. "Am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive." Years passed, and Joseph grew old in Egypt. Seeing his children's children to the third and fourth generation, he lived to be 110 years old. When his time came to die, he made his brothers swear an oath. "God will surely visit you," he said, "and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. You shall carry up my bones from here." Even in death, Joseph's eyes were fixed on the promise, on the land his fathers had been given, on the covenant that would outlast empires. So ends the story of the dreamer who became a savior, of the favorite son who learned to favor others, of the one who was cast into the pit only to be raised to the throne. In this tale, we glimpse the mysterious ways of providence, how suffering can become wisdom, how betrayal can become blessing, how the very wound that breaks us can become the source of our healing. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you're carrying wounds of your own, betrayals by family or friends, dreams that seem impossible, suffering that feels meaningless. Joseph's story whispers to us that our stories are not finished, that our darkest chapters may be preparing us for our greatest contributions, that forgiveness is possible even when justice seems impossible. Sleep well, dear listener. May your dreams be filled with joyful reunions and loved ones, and may you wake refreshed and ready for whatever encounters await you in the journey ahead. The journey continues.